forms. I want to call them green, but I heard that they might be yellow. And being a little colorblind, I still am on the fence with that. So these wonderful bright forms. Now, what this does is, and I heard Dan, if you could just pass it back for me, thank you. I heard Dan mention that being a part of Santa SBREIA, you have certain benefits. And this is, in addition to an extension, this will add to some of those benefits for Santa SBREIA. Two things that this is going to do for you when you turn this completed form in today. The first thing is it guarantees you a free consultation, and because the drive is really far from our office, we can do it over the phone. The other benefit you'll receive is a reduced rate for our services. So later on at the end of the presentation, we're going to talk about our fees. Having turned this in and being a part of coming through Santa SBREIA is going to ensure that you receive a reduced rate. Okay? Now, Dan, you said the up and down. Sort of
yes.
You can do it a couple ways here. You can just up or down on this. Okay, perfect. That should do it. Good to go. Thank you, sir. Oh, okay. All right. So let's take a look at our agenda for today. We are self-directed consultants. We're not a custodian. By custodian, I'm making reference to like a Fidelity or a Charles Schwab, so forth. As consultants, part of our job is to help you find the custodian that has the lowest amount of annual fees, and that also will allow you to self-direct and invest in real estate and other non-traditional assets. As Dan had mentioned, some of these self-directed custodians will allow it, some will not. So knowing which one to go with and also knowing which one has the lowest amount of fees. Another part of our job is creating IRA LLCs. We'll look at some of the differences with the traditional self-directed, traditional retirement account versus a self-directed. The majority of my time will be spent talking about an IRA LLC, which is our flagship product. How that's going to save you thousands of dollars in custodial fees. I'll show some examples about that. And how you can get an IRA mortgage. And I was speaking with someone a little earlier who mentioned the IRA mortgage, which is sort of rare, but I'm finding that I'm getting more questions about IRA mortgages lately. And the one thing I'll say about it now at the beginning is that your personal credit doesn't matter. So in just a few minutes, we'll look at how you can get an IRA mortgage. All right, how can we get started? Here's just a little bit about our company. The managing partners of Self-Directed IRA Pros have over 30 years of combined investment experience. We are registered with the Better Business Bureau. We have no complaints. We have helped our clients, to the third bullet point there. Part of what we do is when we're working with attorneys and top CPAs, we would like for you to think of us as an extension of your professional team while you're out doing your due diligence, searching for properties to invest in, and so forth. Now, we've helped our clients to use their retirement accounts to purchase residential real estate, commercial. We have clients that have purchased pooled funds together and purchased larger assets like office buildings, shopping centers, strip malls, apartment buildings. We have clients that have things as exotic as copyrights and even patents held in their retirement accounts. To date, we have facilitated more than $30 million in IRA purchases. And the way in which we help our clients to achieve all of this is through the use of an IRA LLC. So, Mark had mentioned that this is fairly new, and it's new in the sense of, I think, the popularity of the IRA LLC. But from my understanding, statistically, they say that only 2% of the retirement accounts out there today are truly self-directed. Okay? So it's a very small number. Even less than that are familiar with IRA LLCs. If you're taking notes, this is a slide that you'll definitely want to copy down. An IRA LLC is a limited liability company that's owned by your retirement account, but it is managed by you personally. And many people will refer to this as a savvy investor's tool of choice. And I made a comment to Dan when I first got here. I said, just from talking to a few of you before the presentation began, I said, you've got some really savvy investors here. And he says, yeah, they come from all different walks, and you've got mortgage brokers and all these different people with these backgrounds and really savvy investors. So this is definitely something you should be aware of if you're not. And if you are, hopefully I'll have some information that will enlighten you a little bit more, and I won't bore you guys to death. So it's owned by your retirement account, but it's managed by you. Looking at traditional IRA versus self-directed, with a traditional like a Fidelity or a Charles Schwab, you can invest in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Whereas with a self-directed retirement account, you have the ability to still invest in all of these things on the left here, but in addition to that, you can now invest in real estate, businesses, partnerships, and so forth. In creating your IRA LLC, the steps that we'll go through. We're going to help you to open up your new self-directed retirement account if you don't already have one. And if you have one, depending on who it's with, we may roll it over to another custodian. And as Dan mentioned, you're not pulling the money out, you're not putting, it's not a personal contribution, so there are no limits as far as the $5,000 annual limit, contribution limits. So, opening up your new self-directed retirement account. From there, we're going to create for you your IRA LLC. And then you will get your corporate kit in the mail with all of your necessary paperwork to walk into a bank and open up a business checking account. Once you open that account, you're going to fund the account, and that's what gives you the last bullet point, checkbook control, or complete checkbook control of your retirement funds. How is this all possible? The legality behind it. Internal Revenue Code 4975 identifies the 3 things, transactions, to avoid when using your retirement funds. Now, I'll spend day after day talking about all the stuff you can do. We have people that have, one guy used his IRA to publish an ebook. So, I mean, there's so many creative things you can use your IRA for, but the list of things to avoid is really short. The IRS identifies 3 things under Internal Revenue Code 4975. Number 1, life insurance contracts. Number 2, collectibles, rare stamps, an antique vehicle. I was doing a presentation, a guy asked me, I can't get that 1957 Chevy I've been looking at? Nope, not going to happen, not with your IRA. The third thing that they say to avoid, or party to avoid doing business with, would be a disqualified party. And does anyone have an idea of who a disqualified party would be?
A family member.
Family member. Now, more specifically, and I literally on the way up, I had a call from a guy who said just that, a family member. And I said, well, let's be a little more specific. It's linear relatives. Linear, meaning children, grandchildren, parents, and grandparents. They include yourself in that as well as a spouse. So, you can use your retirement money to invest and do business with your brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors, all these other people, but specifically linear relatives, which I find interesting, but that's the way it's worded. So having said that, if I say the example I gave the gentleman earlier, I said, so if you buy a property with your retirement funds, could I then use Dan as an example? Dan, you have your property and you use your retirement account, your IRA, to purchase that. Can Dan now rent it out to his son?
No.
No. Linear relative. But if his brother or sister said, hey, I love that property you just picked up last month, can I go ahead and live there? I want to rent it from you. Sure. Charge him a nice price. Big deal, right?
Right.
So, linear relatives. Mark and I were talking a little bit about the popularity of this, and here you'll see Swanson versus the Commissioner. This was the big case that really sort of opened things up. Retirement accounts or IRAs have been around, we know, early 70s or mid-70s. So they've been around for a while. But what happened was, in 1996, the IRS challenged the structure of the IRA LLC. And there was a case, Swanson versus the Commissioner. Whereas in the case, Mr. Swanson won the case. And in addition to that, the IRS was forced to pay Mr. Swanson over $50,000 in legal fees. So since that case in 96 is when we really start to see the popularity of the IRA LLC the popularity begin to grow. But that was the big turning point, 1996, Swanson versus the Commissioner. After that case, the IRS released a memo and said, leave these structures alone. And then the DOL, the Department of Labor, released their own memo, released a memo as well. All right. We'll take a look at some wealth building strategies that you can implement if you have your IRA LLC set up and you have checkbook control. The first thing we see on the list here is recouping your stock market losses. And I like to use an example. If I go out and I find a property that's worth $100,000, in today's economy, in this market, is it realistic that I can pick up that property for $70,000? Right? Completely realistic in today's economy. What you've done there in that example is recoup your stock market losses. You're picking up a property for 70 cents on the dollar. In addition to that, you put a tenant in that property that's paying rent. All of that monthly income is going into your retirement account, and it's adding value to the account without you personally having to make any more contributions if you choose not to. In addition to that, you have the appreciation of the property. So if you say, okay, 5 years from now, I want to go ahead and sell it, and you turn a profit of $50,000, all of that goes into your retirement account, and there are no $5,000 limit annual contribution limits. You can put all of that profit goes back into your retirement account. So really a lot of benefits there. Try that same example with a stockbroker. Call up your broker and say, I'd like you to get me some stock, 70 cents on the dollar. That's probably the first response, right? He's going to chuckle. The next thing you say is, oh, and while you're at it, make sure that it yields some cash flow every month, right? And then it has to appreciate also, okay? The reality is your stockbroker hung up back when you said 70 cents on the dollar, right? So, not very realistic, but with real estate, we know that you can do this all day long. Partnering up with someone else's retirement account. You can partner up with a spouse's retirement account. It could be a cash investor. It could be various different accounts can come together and pool funds and purchase larger assets. Buy and lease option property is another strategy. And then what it's all doing is creating tax-free wealth for yourself in the future or future generations. Using your IRA as a down payment. An IRA mortgage. I get a lot of questions about this now. It's becoming really popular. And I mentioned at the beginning that your personal credit doesn't matter. So for those of you that are taking notes, let's look at how can you get an IRA mortgage. The lenders that we found that will provide an IRA mortgage are looking to see these basic things. First, it has to be a non-recourse loan. The second thing they want to see is that the property is cash flowing. And the third thing they're looking to see is in most states they want you to put 30% down. So, what's qualifying for the mortgage is not your personal credit. They're looking at the property itself and your retirement account. And that's how you can get an IRA mortgage. Now, I've heard the question come up before about, well, the property cash flowing. When I go to buy the property, what if it's vacant? There's no tenant, so it's not cash flowing. Well, then the lenders are looking to see that you have 6 months reserved in your retirement account. At the bottom here, the last bullet point is the UBIT, or the UBIT, unrelated business income tax. This only comes into effect if you're getting an IRA mortgage. If you buy a property free and clear with your IRA, this doesn't matter. You'll never see this. If you get an IRA mortgage, a portion of the income that you receive is subject to income tax. The benefit to that is that same portion that's subject to income tax, you can now write off for depreciation and other monthly expenses. So that's why it comes in handy to have a good CPA. At the top, you'll see the IRA LLC that we create for you. At the bottom, you'll see various investors. It can be your IRA, and then a spouse's retirement account, a cash investor, or another person's retirement account. All of these things can fund one IRA LLC. And then that IRA LLC can be used to go out and start purchasing property with larger price points or so forth, businesses or what have you. In this example here, the story I like to share, we have a young client in New York who's about 29, 30 years old, and he had very limited funds in his retirement account. Instead of saying, oh, well, I can't afford any property now, I've only got a couple thousand in there. What he did was he went out and started partnering up with other people, retirement accounts, some cash investors, and they all funded the IRA LLC. He's going around now buying apartment buildings in New York and just renting them out. So, no limitations. Yeah.
Okay, what about the cash investor?
Yes.
He goes into an IRA LLC. Just confused on how that's treated.
There are a couple different ways to set it up depending on what you're going to purchase or how you want to structure it. But if you have an IRA and you're going to purchase a property worth $100,000, and we're going to partner up on this next deal. So you've got $50,000 of your IRA you want to use. The property's $100,000, and I'm going to contribute the other 50 so that to match it. We can write it up several different ways. We It can be a loan to the IRA. That's one